In this video, you'll see how Ukraine's defense didn't just survive an assault of 53 drones and 3 ballistic missiles. It transformed that very attack into a springboard for one of the most unconventional counteroffensives of the war. We'll break down how near disaster struck when drones went off course, the technology that pulled them back, and the philosophy of overwhelming Russia through low-cost innovation. The finale? A drone swarm and artillery strike that turned Samir base into a symbol of resilience. Here's how it unfolded step by step. Before we move on, I will like you to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Why pour that much firepower into one target? 3 ballistic missiles capable of ripping through reinforced structures, flying at 6 times the speed of sound, and 53 explosive drones set loose in the same hour. To Russian planners, the answer was obvious. The Samir base sat less than an hour's flight from the borders of NATO states. It wasn't just a patch of military ground. It was a staging post where fuel convoys were organized, training cycles rotated thousands of recruits, and command officers ran operations that fed the Eastern Front. Eliminating Samir would not only deny Ukraine a key logistic artery, but also broadcast a warning to Western allies pushing weapons into the fight. The attack began with a wave difficult to track by human eye. Drones skimmed the tree line at night, moving fast and low with small pulsing engines that made them hard to detect. Some weaved erratically to complicate tracking systems, while others carried predictable flight lines designed to bait surface defense fire. Above them, much higher in the stratosphere, 3 ballistic missiles broke through thin air at 30 times the acceleration of gravity, descending as glowing needles. The tempo was designed to create chaos, slow saturation from below, and lightning strikes from above, arriving almost simultaneously. The Russians believed this combination would suffocate Ukraine's interceptors before they could engage. Inside Samir, alarms began to sound. Generators switched to maximum as radar scopes lit up. Unknown to Russian command, Ukraine had layered the base with hidden sensor grids positioned miles outside of the compound. Some were truck-mounted mobile units, concealed under camouflage nets. Others were dispersed civilian towers, adapted to track aerial patterns. Together they projected an invisible net wide enough to spot every incoming trajectory. Instead of panic, there was order. Commanders relayed vectors, launching their response with precision. Within seconds, Ukrainian defenders unleashed unorthodox weapons. Interceptor drones, sometimes referred to by crews as bayonets, streaked into the sky. Unlike high-explosive interceptors, these weren't meant to fire missiles, but to ram suicide drones head-on. Their light carbon frames carried sharpened noses, and when they collided, the shock shredded targets into falling fragments. Each successful strike looked like a sudden mid-air spark. At the same time, launcher crews fired Patriot missiles vertically. One Patriot split halfway to conserve energy, releasing multiple sub-missiles that shredded approaching warheads into clouds of burning debris. For the soldiers on the ground, the sky became a display of streaking lights, popping detonations, and fireballs collapsing far from the base. The expected outcome had been annihilation. Russian planners anticipated collapsed bunkers, hundreds of dead, and an erased command hub, but every major piece of ordnance was destroyed in transit. Not one missile broke through. None of the suicide drones reached their planned blasts inside the perimeter. The entire barrage fell apart before touching the ground. What had been designed as an overwhelming storm turned into a wasted arsenal. Later analysis revealed the reason. Effective defense came not from any single component, but from combining them. Radar expanded the warning window, suicide interceptors neutralized mass drone floods, and long-range missiles addressed the ballistic warheads. Russia had counted on Ukraine being forced to juggle these threats separately. Instead, Ukraine used them in layers, each covering the other. This armored web meant even an advanced swarm could fail spectacularly. The failed strike revealed something deeper than just a wasted attack. It signaled overconfidence. Believing speed and volume would guarantee success, Russia underestimated the resilience built into Ukrainian defense networks. By surviving untouched, Samir not only continued to operate, but also became the staging ground for something Moscow hadn't calculated. A counteroffensive sharpened by the very chaos that was meant to destroy it. And while Russia's arsenal burned in the sky, Ukraine prepared to turn survival into momentum, shifting the battle's weight in its favor. What happens when your own weapons suddenly swing back at your own forces? In the heat of battle, the answer is not always clear until seconds decide the outcome. On the night of August 13th into the early hours of the 14th, Ukraine unleashed a wave of 300 swarm drones across the eastern flank. These were not polished, multi-million-dollar defenses. Each was assembled with 3D printed frames, commercial batteries, and components pulled straight off the shelf. The payloads were modest, about 15 pounds of explosives, barely enough to smash a tank or chain react through a fuel supply. But volume was the principle, not size. Hundreds of flying chassis moved in close formation, low against the horizon, their propellers cutting faint lines through the night. Somewhere near the midpoint of their approach, a weakness appeared. Russian electronic warfare units, positioned out of sight, began to flood the airwaves with interference. Simple GPS signals guiding the drones were drowned in noise. Out of 300, 5 lost their path completely. Instead of holding course, they jerked violently east, then drifted back, finally veering toward the worst possible target, the coordinates of a Ukrainian artillery position. The math was blinding in its simplicity. 5 missed drones, each with 15 pounds of explosive, now tracked toward a battery that had supplied fire across the front line for days. If they hit, the result could turn into burned vehicles, dead crews, and silenced guns right at the peak of the offensive. Each drone switched through frequency hopping, jumping between countless microchannels faster than the jamming equipment could block. Operators initiated override codes beamed across encrypted links. Slowly, the 5 rogue drones bent back into commanded alignment. By the final 10 seconds, their path no longer threatened the Ukrainian guns. Instead, technicians redirected them into a set of stored Russian munitions, barely 7 kilometers away. When the drones punched into the stacked shells, a tower of fire shot more than 20 meters into the night. Cameras picked up the blast ripple rolling across the ground. Ammunition that was meant to supply Russian armored pushes had become a rising fireball. That single redirection shifted the mood. What began as a close brush with death turned into a proof of agility. Innovation was not simply about adding different weapons into the sky. It was about controlling what could go wrong and bending it into sudden opportunity. Ukrainian commanders saw proof that adaptation itself could be as lethal as any imported rocket system. With confidence renewed, the swarm was pushed deeper. Recon drones overhead transmitted live positions of armored groups and infantry transports. Artillery synced to those feeds, hammering Russian armor with precise adjustments. Coordinated rushes drove deeper into Samir base. Russian lines collapsed from inside out until more than 300 soldiers surrendered in clusters, dropping rifles and filing away under guard. The message was clear. Survival had not been enough. Through speed, volume, and control, Ukraine shifted from nearly being crippled by its own drones to using those same machines as the spearhead that cut through Samir. The fight for Samir proved that war isn't always decided by the price tag of a weapon, but by how quickly a system can bend, recover, and strike again. Expensive rockets and drones mattered less than the ability to redirect them when failure loomed. A near-friendly fire incident became the very spark that broke Russian defenses. That reversal showed resilience can be as deadly as raw firepower. Looking forward, Ukraine's growing defense industry is steering battlefields towards swarm tactics, adaptive tech, and constant improvisation. Warfare may no longer favor size. It favors the side that adapts the fastest.